morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. I'm Hugo Marfleet, Chairman of the committee. Before we begin, the standard reminder: if we have a fire alarm, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear door into reception and assemble in the car park in the front of the building and wait further instruction. I'd like to welcome Councillor Wendy Bokit, our Executive Councillor for Adult Care and Public Health. Morning. And Martin Samuels, our Executive Director of Adult Care and Community Wellbeing. Morning, Martin. Other participants will be introduced when we reach their item or when they speak. The first is being streamed. This meeting is being streamed in the usual way. Could I ask those in here to turn off their microphones when they finish speaking? Thank you. Apologies then.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillors Mrs Overton, Whittington, Carter, Young and Parking, and we have Councillor Sear replacing the vacancy for this meeting only.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome, Noy. Nice to see you here again. Thank you for supporting. Well, on that, we'll go to declarations of members' interest. So if any member has got any declaration throughout, please let us know. Can we go to the minutes of the 22nd of January 2025? So to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting on the 22nd of January 2025, the minutes are found on pages 5 to 11 of the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Mike Clark. Seconder, Councillor Callum Cook. All in favour? Any against? Any absentees?
Just abstain because I wasn't
Abstains. Right, okay, thank you. No current announcements apart from this is the last meeting of adults in this council term, and I'd like to just thank all the officers for all their hard work and commitment over the last 4 years, and I think we've made some good progress in areas, and thank you all for your hard support. So Mike, you'd like to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. This is my last meeting due to the fact that I'm not going to be re-standing for election, and I'd like to take this opportunity to make a big thank you to all the officers present for your input, your interaction, your rewarding information that you've given to me, and it's been a real eye-opener in my 4 years on the council. And again, I'd like to thank you indeed for your help and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Well, I'll do it now instead of in the announcements, but I too would like to give my thanks, especially to you, Hugo. You've really worked hard to keep the committee going, and conversations and the topics that we've brought up. You've really done your best to look into everything, and you've visited places, I know many places and that, so thank you. And to Callum, since he's taken over. Thank you to the committee, because obviously it's, you know, it's not always an easy committee, but I think politics aside, you've all given your thoughts as the person rather than in politics. So I think that's really good, and I think, you know, you have scrutinised things, and you've scrutinised the officers, which is what your job is, and I really do thank you. And also the officers, thank you very much. Obviously the 1st of May is looming. Don't know whether any of us will be here again, but thank you all for your hard work and commitment, because it is really, really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Noy?
I would like to thank, because occasionally I came a replacement. I learn a lot. I know a lot. So thank you for all your support. You know, officer include you, Hugo, and sometimes you're not there. The vice chair take the last meeting was really serious, but it was eye-opener. And what's a shame, I might not be here in May, but I give a good shot. But thank you for everything you all done, and Wendy for all your hard work, and member committee and officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I'd just like to say I found being on this committee very useful actually in my work as a councillor. It was what I've learnt as being a member of this committee. I've been able to use in terms of contacting officers about issues that have been raised in my division, and it's been very useful. Apart from obviously the important part of scrutinisation, but it's been a learning exercise for me as well. And thank the officers for all their help and support.
Thank you. Karen?
I wasn't going to say anything, but it looks rather churlish if I don't, doesn't it? I genuinely appreciate the support that I've had. I know on the occasions with local stuff, when I've messaged Justin, I've always had a swift and a positive, helpful response. And Martin, I think you've done a cracking job taking over from Glenn, someone with such experience, you know, and coming in and having to start afresh in a new authority. So thank you everybody for everything, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and as you can see, everybody has been very impressed by all the hard work that you've done. So, Callum, sorry.
We might as well finish the compliment of members thanking our officers. Obviously, I've only been on this committee for not even a year yet. And it's safe to say, actually, adults and community was never one that I ever envisaged going on, just because of interest and everything else. But actually, I have found it really interesting, and actually looking at different areas that I never expected to. And it has been fascinating to see the work that goes on behind the scenes at the County Council, which I know we can't do with our team of dedicated officers and other volunteers and other charitable and community groups across the whole county and what we do. So thank you very much for your support. And obviously, I know some of us will be hoping to be here in a few months' time, but that is obviously in the hands of the electorate. But otherwise, thank you very much.
Yes, and I suppose one last thing, the 4 years has been very good, and the next 4 years, well, we'll go into a whole new world of wherever we go. New councillors, local government reform, so, and there'll be one thing for sure, ever pressures on adult social care, so thank you. On that note, Martin, have you got any announcements or...
And I sort of feel I ought to be saying thank you, but but no, nothing particular. I mean, it's always a bit of an end of an era, and thank you for all the kind words for the team. They worked really hard, and I'm pleased that you feel they've been able to give you a good support.
Thank you. So on that, we'll move on to the first item in effect of Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board update. So. For here, I'd like to welcome Richard Proctor, the Chair of Lincolnshire Safeguarding Board. Welcome, Richard.
Good morning.
Kerry Stacey, Head of Adults, and is Stacey here?
No, Kerry's not here, but
Kerry.
I'm here.
Right, okay. And then Justin, our Assistant Director of Specialist Services. So welcome, Justin. So, okay. Who's leading the way? Richard?
I'll take it if that's okay, Chair. Okay, Good morning, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Richard Proctor. I'm the Independent Chair of the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board, which is obviously a role which means I can apply, challenge and scrutiny where appropriate, because I'm not part of any organisation that make up the partnership, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so just an update really. You do have the report with you, and I don't intend to go through it line by line, but it basically provides an update on the current position of the key areas of work that have been undertaken by the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board. Just to talk you through a few things. So in 2022, we established our strategic plan, and over the last 3 years, we've been busy implementing that. We had a real key focus in that plan on prevention and early intervention, and that led to us establishing 6 prevention priorities, and that was supported through each, through having we had a dedicated lead for each of those areas, and that was then reported into the actual Safeguarding Adults Board in respect of progress. We're now coming to the time now where we need to review our approach, and our strategic plan review is scheduled for review. And that will take place next Monday, it will be, on the 3rd of March. And the basics of that, it'll be a face-to-face event, but it will involve all LSAB partners, key stakeholders, and it'll be a real focus on, so we'll be kind of looking at the data, learning from case reviews, Also some key priority areas as well, which we think we need to consider, things such as homelessness, rough sleeping. And the process then, once we've had all that information, hopefully we can then kind of come together and agree our priorities moving forward and together a plan as to how we do that. One of the other things that I think is really important is that we consider what the other partnership boards are doing so that we're not kind of duplicating effort and we're not standing on each other's toes in respect of work. So we'll have representations and presentations from them also on their priorities so we can explore opportunities for collaboration and work there. So hopefully that will be it'll be a good day and we get a good plan moving forward again. Want to also highlight, if I can, some work that we're doing around making safeguarding personal. I know we've been here before to this committee and spoke about making safeguarding personal, but we continue our work around that. We have currently we've implemented our making safeguarding personal plan, but there's further work to do on that we recognise. But what we've done now is we've developed a real comprehensive training programme around that. And we're doing all we can to continue to hold all partners to account in respect of the application of making safeguarding personal. Some of the other things that we've done around making safeguarding personal is we've also, through a bid that came through the local authority, is we've engaged with a local government office consultant, and that individual's been doing some work around exploring, I suppose, some of the issues we've had with the implementation of making safeguarding personal. And that's really looking at the evidence to assess, the validity of the concerns around safeguarding, exploring barriers to embed the MSP principles in the referral process, and what can we do to develop strategies to overcome those barriers, but also evaluating the impact of the application of MSP on the volume and appropriateness of referrals received. And that's really important in that we know that a number of safeguarding concerns that come through to the local authority have not, the making safeguarding personal principles have not always been applied, and that then obviously makes it very, very difficult to assess actually what the concern is. So that's a real key part of that, really. In the previous inspection, it was highlighted by the CQC around a lack of understanding around safeguarding personal, but also around the criteria for Section 42. And I know Martin Samuels has written to all partners requesting, that agencies, apply those principles and understand what actually makes up a Section 42 case referral criteria. We've also just recently finished our annual report, which is a requirement under the Care Act, which we have to do. It was a very detailed report, and what it does, it details all the actions taken in achieving the LSAB strategy by all partners. It's a very comprehensive report. It was actually 58 pages, which we've now also looking at developing like an executive summary to make it a bit of an easier read for people. But it is very powerful in that it details all the hard work that's gone into, across the partnership. And I would pay tribute to all partners for the work and commitment that they do in supporting the Safeguarding Adults Board and the people of Lincolnshire. From a learning and development perspective, again, if you remember, I spoke earlier about looking at collaboration. So we've been doing some work with the Children's Partnership to look at the area of transitional safeguarding, which I know was a recent area of topic, I think, through the recent SEND inspection that just been undertaken. But what we're trying to do is work with partners to kind of create that seamless transition for young people moving from child to adult safeguarding, because we know that can be a really difficult time. So we're looking at how we can work on that and developing a charter with partners so that that can happen seamlessly. And you'll note that we published a Safeguarding Adult Review going back to December 2023. And this case involved a chap in his 60s who had possible learning difficulties. There were concerns around his living conditions, and there was a feature around self-neglect. So as a result of the review process, it identified a number of areas of learning for us. And I only spoke about it yesterday, things such as the application of professional curiosity, when to identify and escalate a safeguarding concern, and also discharge planning in relation to the hospital trusts. Now, all those actions now have been generated recommendations for improvement, and they're now being managed through our significant incident review group who handle all those, the safeguarding adult review process. And then obviously we will then receive that assurance at the executive board to make sure that those recommendations have been implemented. Another area of work that we're really launching into now is around trauma-informed practice, and we developed a training package around that, and we're working very closely with the Domestic Abuse Partnership and the Children's Partnership to look at how we can bring into an introductory course around the really important part of understanding when you're working with somebody that's suffered trauma in the past, and how we can do what we can do as a partnership and as practitioners to support those individuals. And that's pretty much it, Chair, at this moment, but I'm happy to accept any questions that people may have of the work that we've been doing.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report. Couple of bits from me really that sort of have been highlighted, which one is sort of around the care homes, and if the people within the care home have a hospital appointment, there seems to be a little confusion about the best approach to deal with that. And I know we've got Melanie here from Lincolnshire as well, so it's quite good opportunity to sort of just raise it, and I know it's just because somebody called me up about it and said, how do they deal with it? And it's quite right. It's difficult for someone in a care home to then, a manager to then put somebody in a car and take them off to a hospital appointment, and then so it has to be done by other means, and often maybe it's not the right thing that should be done anyway. Maybe it should be more a visit within the home, but that certainly is sort of an area that seems to be a bit vague. Don't know if Melanie, you want to say anything on this?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, this will be, I will be raising it at the next exec, Rick, in any other business, that this has been highlighted as sometimes an ambulance is booked, but it's not seen as urgent. So the ambulance doesn't arrive. The patient is then considered did not attend and is taken off the consultant's list. So that's been recognised, and we have put a small working group together. I hadn't really thought about it as being safeguarding, but actually, Rick, I will, because it is, because you end up with neglect. But it's just a breakdown in the system of it. And Sunil Hindoka, who is the clinical director for the ICB, has taken this very seriously, because his attitude was actually, why on earth are we taking somebody who is frail and elderly out of a care home to a consultant unless it's absolutely necessary? And if it is absolutely necessary, that is not an if we can ambulance, it's a priority ambulance. So it is under consideration, Chair, but it is getting worse because of the strain on EMAS. So thank you.
Okay, Elena, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add, Chairman, there are provisions within the contract in relation to transport, particularly in terms of hospital appointments. But as Melanie said, this is an area under review currently, and that also, it's not just the aspects that Melanie's referred to, but also really giving clarity about where that responsibility lies. So much more information needs to be provided to families at the time of assessment in terms of them admission to the home, because as you say, that can be challenging for providers to be able to support individuals, not just to hospital appointments, but it can be GP appointments as well. They don't necessarily all come into the home. So it is under review, but more widely, not just looking at in terms of bringing that into the home, but just around where those responsibilities lie and how we support those individuals safely to other appointments. It's not just medical appointments, it can be appointments into the wider community as well.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Martin?
And I think this is a really good example of some of the challenges we face when we're looking at safeguarding, because safeguarding is about abuse or neglect. And someone not being brought to a hospital appointment probably isn't an issue of abuse or neglect. It's an issue about the system being inefficient and not thinking things through, and different bits not talking to each other. And therefore probably not really something for the safeguarding system to look at. It's more for the sort of the quality system to be, and the contract management system to be looking at. And therefore one of the problems that we get in the safeguarding system is this kind of issue gets raised through safeguarding, and because it's not safeguarding, it's sort of put on a pin because it's not a safeguarding issue, but it perhaps should have been taken through the quality route, but because it's gone through the wrong route, we might not pick it up. Sometimes it can be a safeguarding issue, and that's where some of the confusion can arise, because I think one of the things we have to be aware of is there's a difference between did not attend and was not brought.
Yeah.
And if someone who can't bring themselves, for whatever reason they're unable to take themselves from wherever they live to attend an appointment or whatever, sometimes if they are regularly not brought, that can be evidence, that can be a pointer that there is in fact neglect going on. And certainly in the children's world, increasingly that's been something where they've been, people have been looking and saying, oh, actually, if this young person or this child is regularly not attending, well, clearly they didn't have a choice about it. The people who should have been looking after them didn't bring them. Is that a sign of neglect? So it's one of those complex areas, but the risk is that we say anything that isn't running as it should be is a safeguarding issue. That's part of the trap that we've sometimes fallen into, and why the figures that Rick was giving about just the huge growth in the number of referrals we're getting, most of which just have to get put to one side because it's not abuse or neglect. It may be a quality issue, but there are different routes for that, and it's getting that understanding across staff in the system is one of the key things that we're trying to do. But the example you gave is a really good example of where people can get a bit uncertain about which route they should go down, and we need to train people to get it right. Yeah,
and I mean, on that note, what you've just said is actually my other point in here is, in effect, I think we're getting, certainly from a public's perception, if we're not careful, we're getting confused on abuse and neglect, and it's all become a bit murky, which has led to a high numbers being put forward with, in effect, sometimes little response. And if we're not careful, we fall victim of having such great numbers that we then miss those that definitely need it because of drowning in the volume and numbers. And I think sort of, if we're not, the whole sort of safeguarding has got a little bit murky in terms of, if we're not careful, it gets more favoured to one type of abuse rather than actually often the abuse is that we might have missed something with somebody in their elderly life. I've got Wendy and then Justin.
Thank you. I agree with Melanie and what you said and the comments there. I mean, I sit on the safeguarding board, so I hear of all the incidents that we have and the non-incidents and the things that come to safeguarding that shouldn't actually come there. EMAS is a big concern to me. It has been for a long time since it joined as an emergency and a non-emergency. It is where you draw the lines. My mother-in-law's in a care home, has been now for the last year. She's bedridden, she can't get out of bed, so she has to have an ambulance to take her to hospital. But I would question, as you've just said, why is she going to a hospital just to be told that she's never going to walk again? That could be done on a video call. Family present, doesn't need to trail her across the countryside for 10 hours and in a bed. So, there is a lot of wasted resources there, I feel. Doctors and homes, I feel that it's sometimes whether the home has a good relationship with the GP and how well the GP works. Again, going back to my mother-in-law, she's been in 2 homes now. One home didn't have a GP visiting. This home has a GP visiting every week and goes round everybody that matron says, can you please pop in and see that person? And I think it's absolutely brilliant. But again, I suppose it's the pressure of GPs, isn't it? Do they have enough time? Do they have enough, but it doesn't have to be a GP. It could be the district nurse going round. It doesn't have to be that. So it's how different things work. And I know, Alina, I mean, you talk to providers all the time, don't you, in residential homes and nursing homes. And I think there's so much different ways of working within our system now. That is the problem. There's not a clear view for what we're doing. Which I feel is probably a bigger issue.
Thank you. Justin?
Yeah, what I was going to say builds on what Councillor Bowkett was saying as well. And it was just to say, you know, Rick mentioned our proactive sort of prevention approach in Lincolnshire towards safeguarding, which is really important. And, you know, we work very closely with the care sector. So in learning disabilities, we use some kit called WIZAN that helps to remotely sort of monitor people's vital signs, etc., and that we can avoid actually getting to the point where there's a need to go to hospital, or we can get in contact with health staff for advice around that. So I think it's that, you know, being on the front foot and changing and looking to prevent and work in more integrated ways as well, isn't it, Melanie, in terms of those things. So, you know, I think there's some really innovative practice in Lincolnshire. You know, again, looking at the delegation of health functions to the care sector, you know, there is the issue of how that's funded. But we've done a lot of work with Melanie around the governance arrangements of those matters. So, you know, just to reassure the committee that, you know, I think we're on the front foot in Lincolnshire in terms of our prevention activity, in terms of safeguarding. And I think we're still one of the few places nationally that has got a prevention strategy, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I don't know anywhere else there that have. Not in this area anyway, so, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Karen?
Thanks. I'd like to reserve my right to speak later, but I wanted to speak because it's pertinent to this. My mum died 2 years ago, but she spent the last 18 months of her life in a nursing home. It was a specialist one for advanced dementia because that's what she'd got. Initially, I did have some concerns about it, but there was a change of structure in the staff, shall we say, and it improved significantly when the management changed. But on one occasion, she fell, because she used to fall a lot, people with dementia often do. She fell once, and I'm not, honestly, she laid on the floor overnight, 12 hours, waiting for an ambulance, and when it came, she didn't go to hospital anyway. You can only imagine how terrifying that would have been. She was 83 when she died. If she had a number of trips to A&E, and they used to give her an escort, I think most of the time, I don't know if it was all of the time, but that meant that a member of staff was taken from the home, which meant it really, and when she was dying, I stayed there overnight for several nights, and I saw how thin the staffing was. I was taking people back to bed when I was like there with my mum. It was that bad. And on one occasion, she'd fallen, and the member of staff didn't put it in the book. It did go to investigation and everything, but she'd got obvious visual signs of pain to me, and I said, "Can you give us some paracetamol?" And they hadn't got any. I had to drive from the south of Lincoln to Roman Wharf to get her some paracetamol and take it back. It just really wasn't good enough. If she had eye-and-ear appointments, I used to take her to make sure someone went with her. But I would argue with somebody, I'm not a nurse now, I'm retired, but I think that anything that impacts on a person's well-being is a safeguarding issue. I don't think it's murky at all. I think if they're not well cared for and happy, I think it is a safeguarding issue, because I think that every person deserves that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions, if I may. The first one is more of a comment. You raised about concerns on page 16 about partners, staff not assessing or processing safeguarding concerns. I know you said that you are doing a review or a new training programme. Can you comment on how successful you think that's been, and how many numbers do you think you're reaching? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the training programme's available for all partners, and we have implemented it, and we have seen a real good take-up on it, but there's still lot more work to do on it. So, yeah, we accept that, and we accept that, there's ground that we need to make up. But I think what's really key is that it's about, for me, it's about cultural change, and it's about actually how do we get people to actually build this into, so that it's a priority for their own agency and not just purely something that the local authority may do. It's actually something that runs, through the veins of each and every agency, because we would want to put people at the centre of every decision that we make, wouldn't we, really? So, so it's about, it's a journey, I would say, but we've tried a number of different ways. We've got as I mentioned earlier, that we've got work ongoing with this individual from the LGA, and hopefully I think it's Friday, he's going to report back to us, so we should hopefully be in a better position then to try and understand, because for me it's about culture, A lot of it's about culture, it's about understanding what is it that's preventing people from applying and making safeguarding a personal approach, because I think as citizens it's all how we would want to be treated. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And also you mentioned about the transition from children to adult. The report didn't quite clarify, and I'd like to know, is there like a grace period of transfer over, or is literally immediately one day you're a child, next day you're an adult, and the papers are just passed?
Well, this is actually another area that, you know, I agree with you on, Mike, is that in some sense it doesn't always transfer, because technically it is two different people, and but it is an area that is of concern, because in some sense people fall out of the system and aren't supported necessarily through into adults, and if we're not careful we end up where they then derail as adults and come back with other issues of, say, alcohol or drug addictions, and it's because we haven't really, it's managing transformation, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. It is correct. It is about how we manage it. And if you look at what good practice would tell you, it always talks about very much about early conversations taking place. So what we currently have, and I know Justin can speak about it from an operational perspective, but obviously those relationships already exist between adults and children in Lincolnshire. But I'll hand over to Justin, who will be able to explain it in a lot more detail about the current process.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's the two things. I mean, there is the sort of transition to adulthood service, which is a broader issue around young people who need adult care when they reach adulthood, and there are formal processes in there between children and adults and how we manage it. I think that the transitional safeguarding is more complex because individuals might not necessarily be eligible for adult social care, but there's still a need to protect them. So, you know, our adult safeguarding team and the children's safeguarding team will work closely, and Rick's absolutely right. It's around information sharing, but also managing that with wider partnerships as well, because, you know, if people are at risk of certain types of abuse, you know, just because they turn into an adult, that doesn't disappear overnight. So we still need to make sure that we work collectively to put that, you know, effectively team around the adult, team around the child, continuing really. So, you know, we've done lots of work with sort of research in practice, etc., around how to protect vulnerable people, but it does need a much wider community approach as well, you know, working closely with the police. So, you know, I think it feeds into the multi-agency approach and all of the joint working between, you know, public protection, adult safeguarding as well. So, but it all comes down to really good communication between, you know, frontline teams and you know, partnership working.
Where does the transitioning service actually lie from an LCC's perspective? So is it with children's, or is it with adults, or is it joint, or?
No, so there isn't
from a scrutiny point of view, where is it? Who actually analyses the transformation service then?
So from transitions to adulthood, so there isn't a formal transitions team as such. So there's a process, and it's joint working between children's services. So transitions to adulthood, in terms of the work that we've done, you've got young people who may have an education, health and care plan and be known to SEND. You have children with disabilities who may be known to the Children with Disabilities team, children looked after, or you may have children who've never been involved with children's services other than schools as well. But so our adult care teams will liaise with a range of different teams in children's services. And there's our common database called Mosaic has something called a passport to adulthood. So children's services will make an early referral through that. And then we will look at that from an adult care and then do transitional assessments with the family and the young people. And then we'll work out which team is best placed to support the needs of the young person when they come over, and do that joint planning going forward. We are doing a lot of work around transitions. So we, you know, through the CQC work, there were some areas for improvement that were picked up there. And to make it easier for children's services and for families, what we're doing is we're doing it so that all transitions come into effectively one inbox, one team. And then we will then have those discussions within adult care about how best to support that person and family going forward, so that, you know, different children's services team aren't guessing which team is best to support it, and there's a much clearer view for the young person and families in terms of communication. So, you know, that work's ongoing at the moment, and it will be completed soon. We've also, following on from the SEND inspection, we're holding effectively a summit with children's services and adult care, which Martin and Heather Sandy, the Director of Children's Services, will attend. And we're looking again at opportunities for continuous improvement, working jointly between children's and adult services going forward. So there's a lot of work going on in here, but we've already, you know, generally the feedback on the peer review was positive around transitions as well. So I know that's quite a long-winded answer, Chair, but does that give you the information you wanted?
I think it's encouraging that it seems though they're all going in, the transition is coming into one team to sort of, in effect, then analyse the risk.
Yeah.
And what the requirements are for the individual.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we end up, as you say, people falling through the net. So
yeah.
That sounds encouraging. And yeah, welcome bringing that forward. I know in some sense, Richard, it's not necessarily your element, but it's the element that if it's not managed right, it then falls into your category.
You're right, Chair, it is, and it is something that we are interested in and concerned about, and it's obviously something that we'll be seeking assurance in relation to as a LSAB, and obviously I would imagine it will come back through to the meeting that the Chief Executive holds as well now in the new working together arrangements with children. So I do believe there'll be lots of kind of checks, balances and scrutiny around that applied by the partners.
Yeah, and I think it'll be quite good to get some figures because, as you said, it's all very well. Some people with learning difficulties actually will struggle out there in the big wide world, and then others have perhaps been cared for by their parents and actually haven't even entered into the system and then struggle. And it is a struggle out there for some, especially if you're not supported, if you've had, you know, even little things like dyslexia that actually as a kid at school is all very well, but you suddenly go out in the outside world and got to start filling out job applications and you perhaps need a bit of guidance and help. Or else if you don't get on the right mark, you're instantly struggling. So, is that all right, Mike?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I've got one more question, if I may. On page 18, at the bottom of the page, it's referring to some training. A 6-year training pathway for members of staff. To me, that seems an awful long time to go through a training programme. Is it done part-time? Is it done on sort of day release? How are we taking so long to train somebody up? Thank you.
Yeah, it's the reason I suppose it's a comprehensive training program, and it stage by stage, and we kind of provide it in a blended approach, so it's a mix between face-to-face learning and also e-learning as well, and it covers the whole aspect of safeguarding, you know. So and it could be accessed by all members of the partnership. We also look at attendance numbers as well now, so we know if agencies aren't attending, and then obviously as an LSAB, as the independent chair, I can apply challenge if agencies aren't attending the training pathway. So for example, making safeguarding personal is an area we know is where we're struggling a little bit to get people to apply that approach. And again, we can use that information to apply challenge if partners aren't attending the training.
Thanks for that. So, in effect, somebody that wanted to could possibly doing more early e-learning programs advance quicker than the 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously it's something that's flexible, and obviously it's something that supervision would want to look at as well. Obviously supervisors know that it's available for them, so they can actually signpost these individuals into that training programme as well as part of their development, or it could be a professional development requirement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rob?
I'm not sure. I saw Karen had her hand up before me, actually. I didn't know whether...
Sorry, I missed that. You want to speak?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, one thing on page 17, there's a reference to public and stakeholder engagement. And something that was brought home to me recently was that somebody who visits houses regularly, i.e. a postman, raised an issue with me. He thought there were some concerns about a resident. In the end, it turned out not to be a safeguarding issue. But he raised it with me because he knew me, and he sort of stopped me in the street, as it were, and spoke to me about it. But I was just wondering what information, if any, is given to those sort of organisations where their staff regularly visit homes, not in a caring capacity, but in other capacities, because he observed that there was a situation he thought where somebody was being neglected, as it were. It turned out not to be the case, but he raised it because he knew me. But if he hadn't known me, and he didn't know about ringing the call centre, if he hadn't been made aware of that, I'm just wondering whether these organisations, you know, British Gas and all the other ones where people visit homes, whether there's any mileage in raising sort of awareness with these people. It's somewhat akin to suicide raising awareness. I remember in Canada, bus drivers were trained in suicide awareness because they regularly saw certain people on their buses. I had that on a training course when I was in the NHS, that's why I remember it. So I'm just wondering, in the case of safeguarding, whether there's any mileage in that, or whether it's just a little bit too extreme to consider contacting organisations where their staff regularly visit properties.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it comes back, I think, to that kind of, as a community, how we all come together to protect people who may be vulnerable. So from an LSAB perspective, we do, so for example, we do lots and lots of inputs to the voluntary community sector, so we hold regular events with them. We've just done one recently. I spoke about the Safeguarding Adult Review quite recently, about where the self-neglect issues were highlighted. So the recent event, they did a lot of input around things like hoarding, self-neglect, you know, signs to look out for. But I'm a big believer in that, and maybe Justin might be able to answer it better for me. But I think that corporate workforce as well is really important, so that when you've got somebody who's a plumber, electrician, whatever it is, going into these houses, and they see things that may concern them, you know, your gut instinct tends to tell you when you're right or wrong a lot of the time. And if you've got that feeling, then, you know, I think it's really good that they're aware of the signs and symptoms to look out for, and also where to go if necessary, if they think that it's a concern. Justin, is that?
Yeah, I think it builds into the making safeguarding personal work stream as well. So, I mean, the key messages, and we'll follow these up through sort of public communications and to organisations and to the key partners as well. And that is that, you know, have a conversation with the individual, because, you know, I think that's the starting point from safeguarding. Speak to the individual, or
That was a bit quick, I think. Yeah. Technically, I don't know whether that's such... It sounds like a test.
So, yeah,
well, we'll carry on for a minute and see if somebody comes in to tell us, which defies everything I say at the very beginning. But...
Yeah. No, I think it would have been continuous. So, yeah, I think it's those key messages in terms of, and it is around us setting sort of our expectations of other organisations as well, and organisations, you know, setting those expectations in terms of what everyone's because safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. You're absolutely right. What we need to avoid, though, is generating the solution as we think we've identified a problem, let's pass it to the local authority to solve, because sometimes there isn't actually a problem there. And, you know, I think it's critical. It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because we want to get those people who are generally at risk into, you know, a protective process, you know, that will support them. But equally, we don't want to over-generate things, that, as Martin was suggesting. So making safeguarding personal and that key messaging and being clearer around what our expectations of individuals are and what they can do to help is all the direction that we'll go through with MSP2.
Thanks very much. I can appreciate you don't want to overload the system, but I just think it may be a degree of awareness and with them, so that people know what to look out for. I think might be an idea. Thanks.
Yeah, just a little bit further on that. If you there's lots of guidance available for everybody on the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board website, and it's only yesterday we will be publishing again our professional curiosity guidance, and it's quite interesting when you hear conversations about things like people not attending hospital appointments, all those kind of things. There's some really helpful guidance on, you know, what to look out for. So if you want, I'm happy to, you know, do you want us to get you the links to that so that you've got that available to you as councillors, or if not, it's easily accessible online. But there's some really helpful information on there. But, you know, so going back to that issue about professional curiosity, for example, I think it's a really good example.
Thank you. It's an interesting one. I mean, like you say, actually, there's lots of tradespeople in and out of houses, more than perhaps any council or public sector worker in some sense. And I don't know if websites is all... It's good for some areas, but if you're a tradesman working, say, for British Gas, you perhaps actually a leaflet just highlighting exactly what it really means by where someone needs safeguarding, rather than leaving it. Sometimes we leave it a bit too vague, and actually that's why we get so many inquiries, where sometimes we should highlight more exactly from a tradesperson. I mean, they're not going to get involved in what I call anything like sexual abuse or something necessarily, but it's more they go into an elderly person's house and they can sort of identify, actually, hold on, alarm bells start to ring here, and perhaps ought to just raise awareness to somebody. Okay.
Just a few questions for me, if that's all right. So, and I suppose it's just expanding on some of the discussions we've had already. My first one is obviously around data and trends. Obviously, we've seen a 55.6% rise since 2021. So what specific steps are being taken to address the root causes behind this increase, would you say?
Yeah, so there's a dual action, really. So there's the work that Rick is leading with the partnership around making safeguarding personal, and you know, the consultancy support we've had with that with partners and the ongoing training. The other part is a piece of work that the head of service, Kerry Stacey, is leading with our corporate transformation team to look at how we manage information and safeguarding concerns that are sent to us as an organisation, and how we respond to them as a safeguarding team. Now, as part of that work, doing a deep dive and review into that, what we've identified is some opportunities to improve the processes of managing that and putting in some pre-screening processes. So a lot of organisations like Lincolnshire Police, and to an extent EMAS, are sending us information. They think that they're doing something helpful in sending us information just on the chance that it might be useful. A lot of that is being treated as, and having to be triaged as, a safeguarding concern. But if we can pre-screen that and use it as intelligence in a different way, we can make sure that the safeguarding concerns that are genuinely going to convert to Section 42 inquiries can be triaged quickly and moved into the safeguarding team, and that will resolve a lot of pressure on the safeguarding team, whilst still allowing organisations to share information through a different route. So we're changing that. We're also looking at the use of technology in terms of the electronic forms, and maybe looking at sort of the AI and virtual guidance for people for when they contact the websites, and it'll help them, you know, through different questions to establish if it is a safeguarding concern, and whether it's going to be a, you know, should raise a safeguarding concern, or whether a different route might be possible. So the combination of these things in terms of modernising our business processes, if you like, should, when implemented, mean that the conversion rate is much higher than it is at the minute and relieve pressure on the team. But we mustn't take off focus of the important work of making safeguarding personal either, because there are prevention obligations on partners that we must, you know, we must explore too. So there should be, when those things are implemented, you know, that should be in the next financial year, then there should be a step change in the conversion rates.
And in terms of, obviously we've talked about, so in terms of referral process, and we've talked about this sort of the new front door screening process, how are we going to measure, success? And what safeguards are we going to put in place to ensure legitimate concerns aren't unintentionally dismissed during triage?
So we do that already. So the safeguarding team do all the heavy lifting at the moment with that. So we do regular quality audits of the decisions around whether a concern should progress or not. We've also got national performance indicators that are reported in the ASCOF that are also in the performance report later. And you'll see that we consistently perform very, very highly in relation to all of those performance indicators and our own sort of regular quality audit checks as well. So we'll continue to monitor those. But what it will do is it'll be a more efficient and effective way of processing that. And opportunities as well to use the intelligence, you know, with wider teams like the public protection team to develop wider prevention opportunities as well.
Thank you. And then my final question in terms of transitional safeguarding. So obviously the new collaboration with the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership, how will the planned charter address gaps in safeguarding for young adults between sort of 18 and 25, particularly those transitioning from child to adult services?
So I think there's two parts to this really, so I'll try and answer the first part and then I'm going to hand over to Justin on the second part. So the first part for me, the purpose of the charter is around cultural change, and I mentioned about that, but it's about actually agencies, leaders, practitioners taking responsibility for actually thinking that this is actually my responsibility, we need to take this work forward. So the charter it'll be a set of guiding principles, as I understand it, based on national good practice as to, you know, how we need to apply and what we need to do. I'm sure Justin can then speak about the operational side.
Yeah, to an extent, I think the summit, the transition summit that we're going to have between adults and children will consider those matters around sort of continuous improvement. It is a challenge. There is a cliff edge in effect in terms of, you know, many children, you know, don't meet the eligibility criteria for adult social care. So, but I think the answer to that is, you know, how do we work collectively as a council and as an integrated care system in terms of looking at opportunities for prevention and early intervention. And, you know, we're going to have to develop joint business cases with our, you know, ICS, ICB colleagues and other key partners to actually look at that. I mean, I think, you know, many of the pressures that are presenting on adult care and, you know, projected forward are young people coming up. So there is a significant bit of work we need to do to look at that. And you know, there is a business case around, you know, investing earlier in children to prevent needs in adulthood. But that will need to be quite targeted. So it's a significant piece of work really, and I think will be a key part of the conversation when we meet with the meeting that Martin and Heather are going to chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. My first point was on the point that Councillor Kendrick made, and I think City of Lincoln Council, their employees, the plumbers and the electricians and that, they get safeguarding and prevent training, and I agree with you. And who knows if there's sexual abuse going on? You know, you just don't know, and that's not age dependent, so I think it's a very, very good point. The second thing I was going to mention is about the transition from children's to adults care. Justin will remember I had a massively complex case, and at the time it was never really resolved, and I don't know if it has been since. I suspect it was really complex, and that was all about the transition from children's, and it was respite care going from children's to adults, and the people weren't really happy with the adult and wanted to stay where they were, but they couldn't. The final point I want to make relates to at the bottom of page 13. It talks about the plan going forward is going to focus on identifying priorities, and risks. And I just wanted to address these comments to Mr. Proctor, because last October this committee sat and we discussed the housing support grant. That's the money that this council, LCC, give towards supporting homeless people. And we were given a number of options. And basically the option that was recommended was that we carried on for another year funding at the same level as we are now. Or, yeah, because we're not into April yet. But it actually meant in practice that because we weren't allowing for inflation, which was £500,000, that actually we weren't funding at the same level. So to me, if you're not funding at the same level, that's a cut. And this committee took a vote, and we agreed by 6 members who were present to 3 that we felt that we should go on, LCC should fund it and cover the cost of inflation. This was taken to exec. I don't feel that committee's views were given the weight that they should have been given, but exec decided anyway that we just carry on at the same rate. So effectively, that's a cut. And my concern is if that you make a cut to funding, then that service isn't continuing at the same level, and those homeless people are at risk. And when it's teeming down with rain and cold like it is today, I think that really is a risk. So I would like it noted, Thomas, for the record, that I'm concerned that the budget was cut, and I'm concerned that committee's views weren't taken on board. And the rationale I was given, you know, we've got to look around for other people to pay a bit more. At the end of the day, we've got over 40 million in, just in the volatility fund alone, and £500,000 doesn't even touch the bottom. And I just think that this was a really bad cut to make. And those homeless people, homelessness, it's a growing issue. I think we were told that between 2020 and 2022, locally it had gone up by 94%, something like that. And I'm just concerned that LCC made that cut, and I'd like that noted for the record, please.
Okay, well, that you've noted your opinion. Thank you for that. And I think whichever way you look at it, every services throughout the council, throughout the government is under pressure. And in some sense, you could say that actually there is some duty for people to sort of be a bit more proactive in some of their lifestyle choices as well. But we are here. Every service is under pressure, and all we can do is make sure that we and everybody works closely together to try to resolve issues. And even when we look at this meeting this morning, we've highlighted 2 areas, which is in effect those that are in care and residential and nursing homes and children, that actually we've paid special attention and focus to, along with other areas of, like as Rob said and you've said yourself, is the raising awareness of safeguarding. The whole issue is what we've speak about is prevention and early intervention to really reduce the reliance on this service. And I think all in all, we are doing a good job in moving forward. So Martin, you wanted to come in?
Come back, Chair. I waited till last. You put 2 people in front of me. I just want to say that's not my personal opinion. It's a fact. It's what happened. It's a fact. And it's a fact, too, that we've got 46 million in the volatility fund. So to pretend that we can't afford it simply isn't a reflection of the truth.
That is a full council decision and the budget decision, and it's not this committee that can just go charging into that pot. Thank you.
Before Martin comes in, can I just remind Councillor Lee that homelessness is a statutory duty of the districts. I sit under Health Housing Care Delivery Group that we discuss homelessness all the time, and the districts there, they come with the amount of money they've got. Government have just given districts a huge amount of money for homelessness. We have done this, yes, and it is not ideal, but we have looked at that service, and the only cuts that we've actually made with that money is by going to video calls rather than actually going out to visit people. So I can assure you, I have gone through that contract and I have made sure that it is looking after the people that we do. No accommodation has been cut. So I will assure you that I have done everything possible, because homelessness is close to my heart. But I will just remind you again that homelessness is a district responsibility.
I think we'll have to agree to differ on that, because LCC's budgets are hugely greater than the districts.
Right, we'll move on. So, Martin?
I was just going to say, in terms of the housing-related support, One of the things we're doing, obviously the executive agreed to extend the contract for a year until autumn 2026. One of the things I've asked the team particularly to do over the next 6 to 9 months or so is a really thorough review of the people who are supported by that programme, what the impact is and where the benefit of that impact falls, and that will then inform decisions on what happens when the contract is due to end in good enough time for us to take whatever steps might be appropriate. So we're doing a careful review of seeing, well, what impact does it have, where does the benefit fall, and therefore what might the most appropriate way forward be.
Thank you. And I think no further questions, so I think I would just like to say thank you, Richard, for coming to the committee. I think we're all going in the right direction in the minute, Justin. From what I've made notes of is I just think that like the care homes and the transitioning, I would recommend for the next time you come to the committee that you put some sort of timelines and those that sort of in effect are involved, the pathway and the involvement, and map it out a bit clearer for the committee to show that we've spoken about it today and taking it seriously forward. Justin, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say a thank you to Rick as well. You know, the role of independent chair is really, really important in my view. You know, Rick has a role to challenge the local authority as well as, you know, working in partnership with me and other colleagues as well. He does that very professionally, and I think that role of independent chair is really, really valuable. You know, otherwise it would be like the local authority marking its own homework, really, wouldn't it? So
no, I think it's very good to have an independent chairman, and you know, well done, Richard, for taking it on and standing up and doing it. And I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of months. So, all right, well, thank you for that. We'll now go on to item 6, which is residential care and residential care with nursing usual costs. So here I would like to welcome Elena Hackney, our Head of Commercial Services, Gemma Hatton, Strategic Finance Lead and Finance Services, Melanie Weatherly, Chair of Lincolnshire, which is Lincolnshire's Care Association. And so I think Martin, who's going to take it away to start with, and then Melanie's going to come in as well and just speak up on, represent Lincolnshire to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a really important issue, so I hope the committee will forgive me if I give a slightly fuller introduction than perhaps I would to some other papers, but I do want to make sure that there's plenty of time for Melanie to be able to give her view. So the issue of managing the market is one of the statutory duties that the Care Act places on upper tier local authorities like Lincolnshire County Council, and indeed on statutory directors of adult social services, which is the role that I hold for this council. So it's one of our core functions, and it's a statutory duty about managing the market to ensure that there is a good quality range of provision available to meet the varying needs of Lincolnshire people, and that as a council that we pay a fair rate for that care where it is the council that buys that. Of course, we have to always remember that a very substantial proportion of care across the county is bought by individuals themselves without any intervention of the council at all. And of course, many of the people where the council does organise their care, they make a contribution to that. But there is an overarching responsibility on the council and on myself as the statutory director. And therefore, setting the fee rates each year is one of the most important decisions that is made. And obviously, because the amount of money that is involved, it's one of the most important spending decisions for the council as a whole. So we have lots of experience of this, as you might expect. We have models for what the delivery of services involves, so all the different elements of provision and therefore the different elements of cost. And these are different for different parts of the sector. So the model for the delivery of home care is different from the model for the delivery of residential care, is different from the model for delivery of community supported living, and so on. And there's a number of these different models which essentially pull together how much does it actually cost to deliver any, a given service. And then in terms of uprating those figures each year, the key thing that comes out is what proportion of that cost is based on staff and what proportion of that cost is based on things other than staff. Because essentially what we do, because adult social care is in many ways regrettably a low wage service, we are very heavily driven by the national living wage, and therefore essentially the staff element of each of the models gets uplifted by the national living wage, and the other element gets uplifted by inflation. and one of the consequences of that is that given that governments for a number of years have increased the national living wage by substantially more than inflation, we therefore see well above inflation increases in fee rates year on year. And of course that has in turn a significant impact on the local authority more widely, because governments over a number of years have noted how there's been a real terms increase in spending power for local authorities, but normally that and more has been absorbed by adult social care, in part due to the national living wage. So we have our model that we do this with. We run that through. We then consult with providers. The process has now completed, and you have the report in your pack. We had a total of 35 responses to that process. That may not seem very many, given that there are several hundred providers across the county. However, I think I would want to underline that those responses covered all 9 of our framework providers for home care, and we had responses from Lincolnshire, and Melanie will of course have an opportunity to speak in a moment, but worth underlining that Lincolnshire represents something like 3/4 of all care homes, residential homes and nursing homes. So responses from Lincolnshire in effect give us the vast majority of the market. I'm not going to go through the comments in detail. The report does give a point-by-point response to the points that were made. What I would want to say is we really value the ongoing relationship that we have with Lincolnshire. I'm not just saying that because Melanie is in the room. I would say it even if she wasn't. We are really grateful for the frankness and the openness and the practical approach of the relationship with Lincolnshire. It makes an enormous difference. I have worked in authorities where there has not been that kind of relationship, where there's been a much more adversarial relationship, and I have to say that generally doesn't benefit anyone. That the positive relationship that we have, I think, benefits the council significantly. I think it benefits the Lincolnshire members significantly, and most importantly, as a result, I think it benefits the people of Lincolnshire. So from the consultation process, what we are recommending to the executive when they meet on the Tuesday next week, 4th of March, is that we should confirm uplifting the staff element of the fee rates by the national living wage, 6.73%. In the consultation, we'd gone out with a inflation estimate of 1.7%. That was based on our usual approach of taking what the inflation estimate of the Bank of England was in September. It's become pretty clear since then that inflation during the course of the coming year is likely to be higher than 1.7%, and therefore in discussions with the Finance Director, it's been agreed that we would change that 1.7% assumption to a 2.5% assumption. That affects the non-pay proportion of the fee rates, and we've recommended that we don't take account within the fee rates of the changes to employers' national insurance contributions. So if I say a little bit more about that, because that's been very contentious nationally. We've done some work, drawing in some experts in the field, done some work about what the impact on providers from the national insurance changes would be. And the answer is it's really quite complicated, because the national insurance changes, employers' national insurance contribution changes, are both a change in the rate, the percentage that is paid, and that's fairly universal. But there's also the change to the lower threshold to which it applies. And essentially what that means is that staff, part-time staff, who previously and indeed currently, up until the end of the current financial year, are not under employers' national insurance contributions, will become so from the new financial year. And effectively the impact of that is therefore very variable on different providers, depending on how many part-time staff they happen to have in the way that they've organised their business. So you could have two providers delivering exactly the same service with exactly the same volume of business, and the NICS changes could be very, very different for them, simply depending on one of them may have a lot more part-time staff than the other. And therefore, the conclusion we reached was that it would be really difficult to have a fair way of recognising this in fee rates, because the impact is so variable that if we simply put it into the fee rates, that some organisations would end up getting quite a lot more money perhaps than they needed, and some organisations would be getting much less than they needed, and that it wouldn't really address the issue. And so therefore we are instead proposing, and you'll see it's in the report, that a targeted support process whereby we will work with providers to understand what the impact on their business from the employers' NIC changes are, and offer one-off support during the course of the coming year, 25-6, in order to enable them to address some of those issues. I think it's worth noting that there is no fund associated with this, and there has been no funding added to my budget for that. It is in effect, perhaps the best analogy is I have an agreed overdraft with the finance director that we can spend money on this, but it isn't built into the budget. We will need to look at this for the 26-27 financial year. Realistically, we will need to build in the NI contributions at that point, but by that time things will be a lot clearer about what the impact is, and we are expecting our conversations with Lincolnshire, we are expecting there will be changes in the way that providers organise their staffing cohorts, which will mitigate some of the impact in that. So we are working, as I say, on this targeted support process. Again, we've been engaging very closely with Melanie and her colleagues in Lincolnshire. I think it's fair to say that some of those conversations have been quite robust, and that some of the things that we had thought of in terms of how this might work have been found to be perhaps less effective than we thought they might be, and we are therefore revising and redesigning the programme. So we haven't got a finalised process yet, but we are asking the executive to confirm that we should have that process that we will sort out. A couple of final points just before I close. It's very easy to get very focused on the percentage increase. We had a regional meeting of Alina and her colleagues from across the region, which I attended because I sponsor it on behalf of the region. I had a meeting yesterday, and quite a lot of talk about percentage rates, but there was also a recognition that the impact of a percentage rate depends on what the base number is, and Lincolnshire's base number, the amount of money that we pay in fee rates, is amongst the lowest in the country, and therefore a percentage increase on a low starting amount doesn't necessarily give you all that much. So we are very conscious that we need to set fee rates at a level that ensures that providers can remain viable, that there is absolutely no benefit to the council setting fee rates at a rate that providers cannot remain financially viable. I mean, clearly there's a really negative impact on Lincolnshire residents if providers aren't viable, but it also ends up actually being very expensive for the council because we have the duty to support people. So we are looking at fee rates, we are looking at the contracts with our providers, and one of the other things that we're asking the executive on Tuesday is to allow us to extend the existing contracts for another year so that we've got a proper amount of time to really work through to make sure that the arrangements that we got really are appropriate and robust, because I frequently, and Melanie and Alina will be sick of me saying this, but I frequently note that we need to work for a triple win, that we have to get something which works for the council, you know, in terms of us being able to afford what's being paid, and that there is sufficient provision. It needs to work for providers so that they can be viable businesses, and it then needs to work for the people of Lincolnshire. And if it doesn't work for any of us, then it doesn't work for any of us. And so it's really important to get that balance right, and that's why, again, that relationship that we have with Linker is so very important, that we are able to be pulling together and working together for the benefit of Lincolnshire people. So I'll stop there, and perhaps you might invite Melanie to give her piece.
Thank you for that. And yes, Melanie, you could share the views.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking the Council for the open and constructive conversations that we've had at what's a very difficult time for all. I'm aware that some providers in some local authorities won't know what the fees are going to be until well into the year that those fees relate to, which I don't understand. And we recognise that the Treasury decisions to increase the cost of NIC without making sufficient funding available to local authorities is a main cause of the problems we've got at the moment. But I would argue that actually NIC is part of the cost of providing care. It's not a discretionary spend. We have to pay that money. And without a significant contribution towards that, as providers, we don't know where we're going to go. The threshold reduction alone costs £615 per person that you employ. So if you just look at frontline staff, that's between £10 and £15 a bed per week for residential services, and 30 to 50 pence an hour for home care, depending on how many part-time staff you have. And in an affluent area where local authority funded care is a small proportion, you can ignore the Competition and Markets Authority, up your self-funder fee, and everybody's happy. A lot of our providers can't do that. They're not in areas where there is a vibrant self-funder market. And some of our residents aren't able to pay a third-party top-up either. And for home care and community-supported living, the local authority is the only customer. So there isn't anywhere else for us to go to cover that cost. So we looked at, should we be reducing costs? The main cost in providing decent care is staff. And to cut staff who are delivering frontline care and support, we think would be wrong. We are committed to working with Alina and Martin and the team to try and find productivity savings, either by providers working together or working together with a local authority. But the total cost of the NIC, just in relation to commission services across the county, I think is probably somewhere between £7 and £7.5 million. I don't think there are £7.5 million worth of savings to be got from efficiency. If there were, we wouldn't have been doing a good job for the last however many years. So we are committed to doing what we can, but what we're saying is, please could you back Martin and Alina on that targeted mitigation? And we do need to have a way where there's a fair and transparent and not costly process of distributing that contribution, because otherwise it defeats the object. We recognise that some services where the local authority is not a significant customer may be in a better place to do something. Residential services may be able to look at delaying repairs. reducing the quality of the food. It's not ideal, but it's the only place you can look. But as I say, for the services which are nursing homes, are very highly staff dependent. Home care, community supported living, there isn't really anything else apart from staff. We have to find a way collectively to be able to continue to do these services. Because my concern is if we don't find a solution to this, either people won't be able to accept local authority funded residents, either new ones or in the worst case scenario, ones they've already got. There may be a temptation for third party top-ups to be set to include the NIC, although that's not what they're there for, and in some parts of the county wouldn't be affordable. We may have services who run at a loss for too long and then suddenly fall over. So we're just saying we understand that the funding was not made available to you. We have lobbied Treasury. I was even stood outside Parliament yesterday waving a placard. And if, our final thing, but particularly based on the House of Lords amendment yesterday, should the NIC threshold be exempt for social care, we would be happy to return any funding that you have made available to us through the Targeted Mitigation Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, there we are. So thank you, Melanie, for that. It's a very interesting debate and in very interesting times on how everybody juggles going forward, and I will raise the fact that it's not just the world of social care. When I speak to businesses of all styles or categories or whatever, you know, there's certainly panic and fear lurking in the winds to a lot of businesses, and I think you know, we are going into a little bit of uncharted water from April onwards, and I think that really the key thing for me in a lot of this is the transition of the hardship fund into targeted support as and when required is really going to be essential, and I think that the close workings that we currently have with Lincoln and the council is exceptionally good, and I think that actually that has to be embraced and taken forward, because what we can't do is let disaster happen. We have to make sure that we are aligned and managing and working with each other to, in effect, raise awareness or try and find solutions to this situation. Questions? Callum?
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the points actually Melanie sort of touched on actually that I was going to ask about, because obviously if we think about sustainability, and you know the report proposes a 5.2% uplift for residential care rates, well, given provider concerns about inflation and the national living wage increases, how confident are we as a council that this will prevent further care home closures?
I'll start, and I may well join Alina. So we start from a model that we have used for some years, which we think is sufficiently robust to give us a sense of this is how much it costs to deliver the services, and therefore the uplifts are a fair recognition. We've taken full account of the national living wage. We've adopted an inflation estimate which is the best that we can at the moment. That does leave the NIC issue, but as we said, that does feel very variable across different providers, and therefore the targeted support is intended to deal with that. In terms of whether any provider will go under, I mean, you know, I can't. You know, there will always be organisations which are better run than others, but what our aim is to make sure that a reasonably well run organisation, the fees are set at a rate that it should be possible to operate on that. And of course, the vast majority do, but there are always some organisations that get into trouble, and we have sadly now well tried and tested processes in place that allow us to respond to that. I mean, it's never the situation you would want, but on occasion that it does prove necessary. But Alina, I'm not sure if you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to add one additional point, and that was where Martin started about the the model itself, the cost of care model. Lincolnshire's operated that model for in excess of 10 years now. And in creating that model, we've brought in independent support in terms of in the way that we've constructed that model. And that's been undertaken by various organisations, independent organisations. But, you know, largely what I would say, although this time it's been inflated by the aspects that Martin's referred to in the report. So, for example, like national living wage, putting aside the aspects relating to the national insurance, because as Martin said, our proposal is to support that through the targeted support fund. But the cost model has been, whilst constructed with independence, that all the market has had an opportunity to influence, you know, the assessment has been undertaken within the marketplace. So 2 years ago, when it was built for this contract, all providers had an opportunity to put their costs through this model. So it is an independent model. In terms of, for this year, it's been uplifted by the points that Martin's actually raised. And that for us has stood us in good stead as a collective for a number of years, and it reinforces the points that Melanie has said. We've been really transparent in that, and likewise providers have played their part in that. So whilst we recognise, and we've been very open, it doesn't include a contribution for the national insurance, we absolutely are committed to working with partners. And, you know, Melanie has rightly raised some of the potential challenges that could be in relation to that targeted support. We need to work through those and find the right solutions so it reaches those providers that most need that.
So actually, my second point, actually, you started to cover it, actually, which was quite helpful in terms of the targeted support process. So in terms of, obviously that's intended to mitigate the impact of, you know, employer national insurance contribution increases, but what criteria will be used to determine which providers receive support, and how is transparency going to be ensured in that process?
Yeah, I mean, transparency is the really key word there, because I think what that does is, is underline the importance of the working relationship that we have with the sector. It's the process that we're working through now. Okay, so we've had some initial conversations. We've had initial conversations with Lincoln. In the spirit of being really honest, in terms of our initial proposals, wasn't wholly accepted by Lincoln for the points that Melanie said. She felt it was very complex, and what it potentially could happen is some might benefit more than others. So we're literally got our heads together in a couple of weeks to go through that. So the process isn't designed yet, but what we need to ensure, there will be transparency, but what we need to do is bring in a simple system that it meets those providers that most need it.
Yeah, and then just my final point is, obviously, you know, all of this is to do with individuals and obviously families as well around them, and obviously providers are now able to adjust third-party top-up rates during the extension period.
Yes.
So what protections are we putting in place to prevent residents and families from facing unexpected and unaffordable costs?
So in terms of executing the new arrangements, all providers will have to declare what their rates are for each individual room. And then there will be a process that we'll undertake to understand how that impacts on the residents that are residing in those establishments. Where it may require a top-up, then there will be a discussion with that family in terms of the cost of what that room shall be. Obviously, we don't know the impact of that at the moment. It needs to go through full governance, so for the executive next week, then the contracts will go out, and we'll have a 3 to 4 week period where, as I say, that providers will then set out what their rates are, and we'll follow that through with families. What we do in terms of, and it goes back to the comment that was made previously around someone's personal experience of a nursing home. Every single home in the county will have an assigned contract officer, and that contracts officer has oversight in terms of not just in terms of compliance of them complying with the contract, but also very much it's around supporting that provider as well. So there are regular visits with that provider, and they will look at things like to make sure that charges are not unnecessary charges are being passed on to third parties. So there is an element of monitoring around in that space, but it effectively will be executed once we have clarity on what the charges the providers will set.
Thank you. Karen?
I think I just wanted to say that I think we owe it to you to support you. It's such a good, detailed report, and I can hear the concern in Martin's voice and Melanie's voice, you know, and I personally would support this on that basis. I've got faith in you. I actually completely agree with the national living wage growing up. I come to a different committee and we hear about people, we haven't got enough staff, and, you know, we've got to pay them enough to make it worthwhile. So I agree with the national wage going up. I understand your concerns about national insurance. I do get that. And I just think, because we'll hear the inevitable noises about how much this will cost LCC. We had the budget meeting on Friday, and most years this council puts council tax up by 4.99%, and in election years only it puts it up by about 3%. So, you know, if the council is looking around for money, then it perhaps ought to have taken a little bit more notice of the Section 151 officer's recommendation to put council tax up more. But I understand why they didn't, and I'm not arguing that. But, you know, if we talk about the council being short of money, then we have to put that context on it as well. But I'll vote for this because I've got faith in you, and I can hear the concern, and I can hear the amount of work that's gone into it as well. So I do support it.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to hear that collaboration is going on and sort of a transparency word is used. Without that, I think, you know, the whole system could crash and we'd have an even bigger financial issue. I hear you're doing the uplift at 2.5. Have we any idea, is that going to keep enough providers afloat, or have we got some concerns that we are going to lose a few, therefore it's going to impact on not having to be able to provide accommodation for those that need it?
So if I can start with that, and it's possible that I'll see whether Melanie does death glares at me. Our view is that the uplifts that we have recommended are sufficient and appropriate, taking into account the pressure of the employer's national insurance, and that is a that is a bit to one side, but that they should be given that the robustness of the cost models that we've got, that the uplifts should be sufficient to allow providers to continue. Almost certainly there will be providers that will fail during the course of the coming year. While there is, you can draw a link to fee rates, I think what we would normally find is that providers fail not simply because of fee rates. So I think I would argue, and I would believe that the fee rates that we are recommending are sufficient and appropriate for there to be a sufficient and market which meets the needs, which is our obligation. But I think that there always will be some that will go up. But I can feel Alina twitching, wanting to come in.
Just to add one additional comment, is this is an extension for a 12-month period only. And whilst we're trying to execute the new arrangements for the next 12 months, what we're also working on is what the commissioning arrangements need to look beyond the 12 months, so 2026 onwards. And in terms of it having a sustainable marketplace, we strongly believe that we need to have different types of commissioning arrangements for residential care going forward. So at the moment, what we're doing is some detailed work to try and understand what that demand will be for the future. And ultimately, what we probably, this time next year, probably a little bit earlier than that actually, we'll be coming back with proposals in terms of what the design of the new arrangements will be. That's how we believe it will be sustainable in the longer term. simply just to add additional uplifts on our cost model. Whilst I am absolutely in complete support in what Martin said, that we believe that is a fair rate in terms of the way we commission, and as Melanie alluded to in her presentation, there always is the opportunity to make improvements and make some efficiencies. But to the credit to the sector, I've worked really hard over a number of years now, and actually there isn't, it's a fair cost. That there isn't. It's not a Rolls-Royce service. Efficiencies have been made, but certainly for the future, in the way we commission and what that looks like, we believe needs to change for it to be sustainable in the long term. So this is just a 12-month extension.
Thank you. Melanie?
Thank you. My comment would be, yes, I think it is a reasonable fee if national insurance thresholds had not moved. The national insurance thresholds make a significant difference to the cost of delivering care. Lots of our services, Lincolnshire County Council is their main or only customer. But I recognise that Treasury did not make that available for commissioned services, although it would have done had you still owned the care homes, which I personally think is fundamentally wrong. It should not matter in terms of what the national contribution to people's care is, the model of delivery chosen by the local authority they happen to live in. I have made that point. I'm about to go and meet the Secretary of State, and I will make that point again this afternoon, even though that's not the purpose of the meeting. But I think we recognise that you haven't been given that money to pay those, to put those costs into the fees. But I think we ask you to recognise that without a significant contribution to that, there will be challenges, because Alina and her team are pretty good at the job. And the fee is enough to deliver care, but it's just about enough to deliver care. There is not £15 a week spare or 50 pence an hour spare on the normal rate for us to cover the cost. So we need to get our heads together to see how we can do that. But please recognise that we are dependent on Lincolnshire finding something to make a significant contribution towards that cost, unless the government reverses it, which I doubt.
Thank you for that. It just highlights some of the issues between commissioning and non-commissioning services, and unfortunately there's not a lot we can do on that. That's a government approach. Rob?
Thanks, Chairman. I've been particularly struck by Melanie's contributions this morning. I think her summation of the issues is very impactful, and it's really brought it home to me, and I appreciate your comments. I think it just covers a whole load of issues, the way the impact, the NI increase and so on. I'm sure government never thought that it would have an impact on organisations such as the care sector or charities. I know the air ambulance is going to have to raise several tens of thousands of pounds to meet their NI contribution, so even charities have been hit by that increase. Not only the care sector, and obviously private sector businesses as well. So firstly, it was a gloomy outlook from my point of view from April across the country. And I just hope inflation doesn't go up. I've got a horrible feeling it probably will. I just fingers crossed that we don't have an increase above what we've predicted, but I know that's a possibility. But I think Melanie's summation of what the situation is, it's actually great to hear from somebody who's actually, shall I say, at the coalface, and I think that's really made an impact on me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Noi?
Thank you. I will support. I think Melanie, the way she points it out. I agree you should put up, minimum wage, but the government didn't give money to the business people or the care sector, money to pay light. You have minimum wage, you have national insurance, then you have a pension scheme on that. So I will give heart to you. I hope you can receive it next year, because we are in really Wally. People don't have money, but the council, you cannot give bail now, but you can say, oh yes, government will put minimum wage or national insurance. But the business people who have to find that money, very, very worrying. And good luck to you. I can tell you that. I have that feeling because my husband run the business, and he say it's going to be a tough year and a tough time for you. And I hope you can deliver it for next year. Care might put it, say, yeah, you have this packet, they might miss something out. You might not deliver what you think you will get. Going to be some cut in that corner. So I'm quite very concerned. And yeah, really good report, but I'm worried. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response? All okay? I mean, it's all, it's going to be a challenge, whichever way we look at this, for everybody. And, but thank you very much, Melanie, for coming. And thank you. Right, well, I think we'll go to what the recommendations are. And I think on that we'll... so first off, agree with the recommendations. And then second part will be to put any further comments to the executive. So I'd like to propose that we support the recommendations listed 1 to 9, I think, aren't they? Remember right? Yep. And so I'll propose. Have we got a seconder? Got Rob, second. All those in favour? Excellent, thank you. That's everybody. So thank you for that. Comments to the executive. I think attention needs to be to emphasise the importance of the targeted support project needs to really be highlighted. It is very difficult because, in a sense, we are talking about private sector here in some sense, and even if we are their only client, but it is, you know, when you look at nursing homes and you drive around and you see care homes, yeah, I mean, I've got some in my areas that are in the middle of, you know, very rural villages, and then I've got some on the edge of towns which are modern, efficient, and you know, and their sort of cost structure is completely different. And then you've got others in a large old country hall, and you think, Paul, the cost of running those is also horrendous. So, and I think what we really need is lower energy costs, which would actually give a lot of relief to care homes that have very high heating bills. But targeted support, the other, I think going forward, the whole of this sort of, with the targeted support of, in effect, creating sustainability and designing. We've got 1 year to, which this is an extension, and really I think emphasis needs to be to use this year wisely to look at the whole word of sustainability and designing a new approach. And I think, you know, and I hate to say it, but money is always going to be tight now going forward, and I think that we need to look at ways in which we can work differently to generate savings or sort of reduce costs, really, yet provide a decent service. So we need to sort of keep looking at that, and I think whichever all contracts need that really going forward is to keep evaluating, and sometimes I think we need to look at the concept of how can we do it differently. So any other views or comments? And I think the final one is, you know what, the word transparency has, you know, Melanie was very appreciative of our transparency, and you know, and give you credit on that one for that, and you know, taking this forward. So in difficult times, transparency and collaboration is the way forward. So you know, and I'd put that as a you know, very good practice, and keep that arrangement going. So okay, thank you for that. So on that, we'll move on to item 7, performance report for Q3.
Okay, I'll pick that up. There are lots of performance indicators in the report. I'm not intending to go through them. I think the point is that the way the reports are presented, it can be quite difficult to see the wood for the trees. So what I'm intending to do is just say a few words about the sort of the broader picture of performance for the directorate. So I think what comes across quite clearly is that we work well and we deliver effectively when people enter the social care system. I think it's worth highlighting because sometimes in the media it can be, you can gain the impression that the purpose of social care is to get old people out of hospital, and that tends to be the bit that gets focused on. That's actually really quite a small proportion of what we do. 4 out of 5 people who enter the social care system do so from the community rather than from hospital. So only about 1 in 5 come from the hospital. Many of the people we support are people who have they have a need. Their initial need is for adaptations in their home. Obviously, the Disabled Facilities Grant, which pays for those adaptations, it comes through the county council, but it's a district responsibility, and the money goes straight to the districts. We do have a role in terms of our occupational therapists doing the initial work to identify what the aid and adaptation might be. We have very, very short waiting lists, so that people go through that process really pretty quickly to have a clear assessment of what they require. I recognise that sometimes the amount of DFG that is available to a district means that they're not able to implement that aid or adaptation as quickly as they might wish, but our process is very quick, and generally we are pretty good at getting people out of hospital when they need to be discharged, doing an assessment in terms of their occupational therapy needs, where people are struggling in the community to identify what is required to support them. And our reablement service has a very, very high, I mean, it's a outsourced service provided by Libertas, but that service delivered on contract to the council has very good rates, so that a very high proportion of people who go through that process, 91 days later, they either have few or no care needs. So we do really well in that process of getting people when they start into the system. On the public health side are the Wellbeing service, which is delivered by the districts on contract to the council, and our integrated lifestyle service, again delivered by a third party. Both of those have really good performance, very good reputations, and deliver significant benefit for Lincolnshire people. I think you've just seen that we have a good relationship with our market, and that we have a really effective contract and quality management system. So a lot of strengths across the directorate, and I think that the performance report brings those out. That said, we do have real issues in a number of areas. It's very clear that as a county we have much less supported accommodation for both working age adults and older people than you would expect us to have compared to other places like us, and that probably means that there are people who are in residential care who actually could be still in the community if supported accommodation was available to them, or there are people who are living with friends and family where it's probably too much for their informal unpaid carers to support them, but they're hanging on to maintain someone in the community. So there's work that we need to do there. We know that there is more we need to do in the area of intermediate care, working closely with our colleagues in the NHS. There are too many people where there's an incident at home, they fall or they're unwell, and they end up going to hospital when they probably could have been supported to stay at home. And while I'm not knocking hospital, no one wants to be in hospital unless they absolutely need to. And so if there were things that we could do, there are things that we could do that would help some people who currently go to hospital, and therefore that adds the pressure on the hospitals. There's more we could do to help them to stay at home. And then there's more that we need to do to help people to be discharged that bit sooner, to sort of go through a convalescence process. We're aware that in the older people's residential care market, there's probably more capacity available than there is demand. And so a lot of our homes are operating at about 80%, 75 to 80% occupancy. That really causes issues in terms of their financial viability. And in smaller homes, it can have an impact that the community of people in the home isn't quite as big as you would like it to be. So there's not enough people to make it a sort of proper community. So we're working with the sector to see, are there some homes where actually it might be better for them to leave the market in an ordered manner, rather than struggle on, not have sufficient occupancy, therefore not be properly financially viable, and the risk that they then fall over, and the consequences of a home falling over are never very good for anyone concerned. It's expensive for often the homeowner, it's expensive for the council, and it's not a good experience for individuals. So we're working with the sector to see where we might be able to right-size the market. And similarly, we have not enough residential provision for working age adults, and sometimes we find that people have to go out of the county to find the right sort of provision, because it's just, we just haven't quite got the right capacity here. And again, we're looking to see what is it that we can do to expand the right sort of working age adult residential care capacity within the county. And in that regard, we're very conscious of some of the developments that have happened in the children's residential home capacity, which has a lot of similarities with the working age adult residential capacity, where there've been some real issues. On the one hand, the economics push things in the direction that from an economic perspective, it works for providers for there to be never quite enough capacity. That works well for providers. It doesn't work well for councils. It doesn't work well for people. And we've also seen some movement of consolidation where more provision comes from large national organisations, which perhaps have a different take on what they're trying to do compared to smaller local organisations. We need to work there. We're aware that there are some areas where we need to do some work in terms of community capacity and community placements, and I mean, I've touched on supported accommodation, but again, sometimes there is a sense that we may have people who are in residential care who could be in the community if we just had certain different services available, recognising that we have to be very careful about the cost, because, as we've identified, there isn't money sloshing around within the adult social care budget, and we do need to move to a greater focus on prevention. It's a really key area for us. It is clearly much better for individuals if they never have the poor experience, if they never have the fall, if they never have they don't develop type 2 diabetes or whatever. It's clearly better for individuals if they are able to remain in good health, that the illness has been avoided, and of course if people are in good health and don't have incidents, then clearly that's good for the county council, because it means we don't have the demand on services. So I've set up an improvement programme across the directorate, has a number of strands to it. Each of my senior officers is leading one of the strands. Justin behind me is, for example, leading the supported accommodation strand. We're looking to restructure the staffing teams so that we can really strengthen and focus on social work practice, so that there's a very clear target operating model, bringing the teams together so that we can make sure that good practice is really thoroughly embedded, that we can take the good practice we've got and we can go further with it. We're seeking to strengthen our strategic commissioning capacity so that we can really look forward and see what will demand and what will the market look like in several years' time, so that can complement the existing strength that we have. I mean, you heard from Alina earlier, the real strength we have in the commercial contract management procurement side of things, so we're wanting to complement that. And as I say, the programme has a much greater focus on prevention and early intervention as a way of helping people to have the best possible life, because working on the ideal, that wouldn't it be fabulous if no one needed social care? If everyone lived a life that was healthy and supported, and they were able to live in their own homes with the support of their community, and then they came to the end of their life. That would be the best thing. And so we're looking to see what more can we do in the prevention field so that becomes a reality for more people, so they don't need us. Not that we wouldn't make care available when people do need it, but it's that as I say, no one grows up looking forward to being in a care home. And the more we could do to make that a reality, that people don't need to go into care because they are able to live a healthy, good life in their home. So that's what we're working to. So I may have strayed slightly off performance, but I think it's given. I hope I've given you a sense of the direction we're trying to go, and give you some context within which you can look at the performance indicators.
Thank you. Any questions? Or Mike?
Thanks for a mass of facts and figures. On direct payments, it's mentioned on page 126. You say you're trying to promote it to increase the numbers. How are you actually going to do that? Is it a one-to-one, or is it just a leaflet through the door and when somebody's targeted? Thank you.
Direct payments is a really interesting situation for us because we have quite a high proportion of people nationally, compared to national benchmarks, who receive a direct payment. I think there is a fair amount of evidence that we haven't quite got our direct payment processes right. That there are people who are having a direct payment who probably actually just want a managed service, because there are definite advantages in having a direct payment, but it can be also quite a lot of work to manage it. So we're looking at are the right people getting a direct payment, people who really want one or will really benefit from it, and are we setting the levels and managing the levels of direct payments right? But for people for whom it's appropriate, it is a very, very good thing. And we are looking to ensure that the social workers who when they have a conversation with someone that says, okay, well, we've done a strengths-based assessment of your needs, we've identified that there is a need for care and there's an entitlement to care, let's think about the best way in which that might be delivered. That at that point, they should be having a conversation with the individual about, here is the range of managed services that the council offers, and essentially we can sort it out for you, but there is always the option of a direct payment, and to have an informed and intelligent conversation at that point with the individual. So it's not really we wouldn't go out and advertise it to people. It's that when they're having the conversation with the social worker, that should be part of the conversation about the person-centred approach. What's the most appropriate thing for you as an individual in your unique context, and direct payments should be part of the option there.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining that. You mentioned about some people falling and going to hospital when they possibly wouldn't need to. Would it be or could a system be set up whereby if they do end in hospital, they are assessed and then it's found that they are capable, that they could be maybe quickly transferred to a care home or a nursing home where they could be looked after there, therefore saving on a hospital bed, and at the same time their time in a care home would end up costing the taxpayer less, but that person has been cared for through the process. Thank you.
So we have a variety of schemes that do pretty much exactly that. I think, for example, we have active recovery beds, which are block book beds in a number of care homes where there's a wraparound support of reablement support so that people can be very quickly discharged from hospital. They can receive the appropriate reablement support that they need in those beds, not in a hospital, in a care home, and then can go home quickly. There are transitional care beds as well, which do something broadly similar in a slightly different way. I think the issue that we have is that we haven't quite got the capacity focused in the right bits of the system. So we've got we've got quite a lot of capacity. We make quite a lot of spend, both ourselves and the NHS. We spend quite a lot. We do quite a lot in this area. It's not as coherent and as well focused as it needs to be, and so we're doing work with colleagues in the NHS to make that system. So at the moment it's a I was in a meeting with NHS colleagues yesterday where I said that we're in a position where the whole is less than the sum of the parts at the moment. We've got lots of bits, lots of really good services, but they don't quite fit together in as coherent a manner as they should do, and it means that we've got a bit too much in some areas and a bit of a gap in other areas, and we're very keen to work with NHS colleagues to bring it together, to look at it and make sense of it as a whole system. So there is more we can do, more we need to do. We're not quite there yet.
I wish you every success in that, because cooperation, coordination and communication seem to be something that's sometimes lacking.
I suppose that's where the Better Care Fund comes in, is because in effect it's trying to pull the budgets for the most efficient system that we can get. So, Karen.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to say thank you for a very detailed report and the feedback that you've given just now as well. It's really helpful. And I guess going forward, the point that you make about there not being enough supported housing for people who could live outside of the family home but can't because it's not there, that's actually really important because it impacts on their experience of care and the family who might be struggling to look after them. And I appreciate we're not awash with money, but sometimes you have to make that investment in the first place to then reap the benefit of it. So if we all do come back next time, it's something to take on board if we continue on this committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and well done for achieving the results. Sorry, Rob.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, thanks for the report. I was just interested on the indicator percentage of people aged 40 to 74 offered and received an NH health check. It's great to see we're the highest amongst our SIT for neighbours, but there's still a significant number, obviously, who haven't taken up the thing. I was just wondering, do we have any data on whether it's male or females? I've got a suspicion maybe it's men that are less likely to take up a check than female. I don't know, I may be wrong. I just wonder if there's any more detailed data on the sort of demographic as well of people who've not taken up the checks. Because I myself took advantage of it some years ago and it did pick up something. So it is well worth having the check when it's offered. And it's a preventative thing as well, of course. So I was just wondering if there is any slightly more detailed data as to the groups of people who are not responding.
So the answer to that question would be yes. I don't have it, but colleagues in public health do. And this is one of these slightly difficult and complicated areas because NHS health checks are commissioned by the local authority through the public health grant. They are delivered by GPs, and it's one of those sort of slightly odd things where health checks can, in theory, be delivered by any qualified provider. You don't really need to be a GP. It doesn't really need to be your own GP that does it. It's a fairly standard process. However, the people who have the lists of patients are GPs, and it's really, we're therefore in a position where potentially there could be a market where organisations would come and do health checks and have interesting ways of advertising to people and drawing people in. In practice, that isn't possible because it's the GPs who hold the data, and only the GPs have access to the data. And Derek and his public health team do work very closely with GPs to encourage them to be interested in this and to take it up, but it is entirely voluntary. No GP practice is required to do this, and some GP practices choose not to do it, and there is not a great deal that we can do about that. And it's really up to the individual GP practices to decide what they do. So we can do analysis of the kind that you've described. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of analysis has been done, and we can give advice and encouragement to GPs. But ultimately, this is a GP-led function. It is a slightly odd arrangement where the government gives the local authority money to commission GPs to do something. I'm sure there's a logic to it somewhere, but it does cause us some issues.
Karen?
It was only a brief one, but I'm at a practice in Lincoln, in the north of Lincoln, and I changed over I've lost track, a couple of years ago. I've not once been offered an NHS health check. And I was on statins, and I've stopped taking them and started having the drinks because I don't like them. But all those kind of things, you would think someone would look at my records and say, you need a health check. But I've never been offered one, not once.
AI, we'll look at it in the future. But, well, thank you for that. And, no, well, it's good news that we've got zero non-compliance at this point in time. So that'll be for the new committee to wrap up the Q4 report. So on that then, Simon, can you take us to the last agenda item?
Yes, thank you.
Work programme.
Thank you, Chairman. The work programme is set out as usual on the end of the agenda. Some items have been populated for the new council term. This time there is also, at your request, beginning on page 154, a sort of a 6-page summary of some of the key items that the committee has covered since May 2021. Yeah. I don't want to go through them in detail, but that's just there for the record. Thank you, Chairman.
No, well, thank you for that, Simon. I think it's very handy for, well, we can reflect back on the work that we've done, and the others can reflect on the work we've done, but also it sort of paves the way for the next committee to also have a look and see and take it whichever way they want to take it going forward. So thank you for all your hard work, Simon, in the process. So on that note, thank you all for coming, and have a good journey back, and thank you for your participations over the last 4 years. Thank you. Well, it's a good job we did the goodbyes at the very beginning while everybody was here, which was why